we spend an enormous amount of money. And we have the best military in the world. Is it sufficient for all of the problems we have? No.
For over 20 years, John Hamre helped oversee defense spending for the U.S. government, rising to become Deputy Secretary of Defense under President Clinton. Now he's president and CEO of the Center for Strategic and International Studies.
We do have a fine military, but it's an extremely inefficient system that we have to buy things and the way we're organized.
The Department of Defense budget for 2024 is edging toward $1 trillion, more than the next 9 countries combined. It amounts to some 13% of federal spending, or about 3.5% of total U.S. GDP, and goes toward everything from pens and notepads to missiles and fighter jets. But for all that it spends, there are plenty of people who believe it may not be enough.
As a percentage of GDP, the U.S. government is spending half as much today on defense as we did in the 1980s. We're spending 1/20th as much on defense as we did in the Korean War. So the needs are growing, the funding is declining.
Amy Ziegart is a political scientist and a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution, specializing in U.S. national security and defense.
I think there are 2 problems, David. One is that we're not spending enough, and 2 is that we're not spending wisely enough. We need to be spending money on low-cost, high-tech, affordable, unmanned systems and other capabilities.
How much the U.S. spends is one thing. Spending it in the right places is quite another, particularly in a world where the very nature of war is changing rapidly, as we've seen most recently in Eastern Europe.
We're watching the war in Ukraine, and it's opening up entirely new concepts of warfare that we're going to have to really figure out. And I don't think we quite yet know how to do that. But we do have a very good system for looking into the future and designing weapons for that future.
Many Americans are familiar with the Indiana Jones movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark, that famous scene where there's a machete-wielding guy in the market, and Indiana Jones takes out the gun, the superior technology, and shoots him. That's been the strategy of the U.S. military for the past 30, 40 years. We're going to out-engineer the adversaries. And it doesn't matter if we're outnumbered by them, but our capabilities are going to be exquisite, and that's how we're going to win. That's not the battlefield anymore. Now, if we're Indiana Jones in that marketplace, it's 10,000 machete-wielding guys, and some of them have guns too. And so Indiana Jones is going to run out of bullets before he runs out of bad guys to shoot. That is essentially the United States and what we face with the rising threat of China in Taiwan, the South China Sea. And war games show it. The CSIS war games show we run out of ammunition within a week or 2 in a fight with China.
For the U.S. to keep up with changes on the battlefield, it will need more than just new equipment and new technology. It will need to reform the way it procures that equipment and technology, making it more streamlined and flexible than what the Pentagon does today.
I think there's widespread agreement that the procurement process is desperately in need of modernization and revamping. So the procurement process is very good at some things. It's not very good at rapidly developing and fielding capability.
Those trying to do the innovating agree that the process badly needs reform. Andy Lowry is CEO of Epirus, a defense tech company based south of Los Angeles. He's working on a system to protect against drones like those used so effectively in Ukraine.
Bases, aircraft, tanks, cars, vehicles, stadiums, refineries, borders, all of these things right now are falling prey to an infiltration of drones, not just flying drones. You have drones on the water, drones on land, drones in the air, drones in space.
Lowry's company is one of the many so-called neo-primes laboring to help the Defense Department make the big shift from slow development of huge weapon systems to the new world of innovation and fast scaling.
We've kind of grown a little comfortable, I would say, in the way that we've been fighting this sort of war of deterrence. But now enter this new age of consumer electronics, highly distributed, highly networked. No one single thing can do that much damage, but when you add hundreds and put them in a swarm configuration, it's the new way that wars are being fought, and it's confounding our Defense Department.
Lowry says part of the problem is the size of the Defense Department itself, arguing that its scale and its procurement system may get in the way of spending its money wisely.
It's expensive to produce and maintain defense technology because, one, it's very low volume. You know, military systems, for the most part, traditionally have been low volume. They haven't had to produce a lot of them. So there's a lot of change and a lot of customization to each and every program. So that adds a lot of expense. Two is we're trying to get best in breed performance. I mean, we don't want to skimp on how high a performance that we get. So performance becomes paramount to building great systems. And so it becomes expensive to get the highest level of performance.
The most frustrating part of this story is that there are lots of really talented, dedicated people that are trying to change this whole process, and they are swimming upstream. So the late Ash Carter, Secretary of Defense, really started this push for a defense innovation unit here in Silicon Valley. Lots of people really worried about the direction of spending and the need to actually produce more capabilities on a faster cycle to adapt to the times. Members of Congress, some of them really care about defense innovation, but members of Congress, we know, care about getting reelected. And so there are natural electoral incentives for members of Congress to protect the jobs that they currently have in their district.
One path toward reforming defense spending is through doubling down on the private sector. Hamre says it has both the capital to deploy and the tolerance for risk-taking that innovation demands.
Probably the most important thing is, 50 years ago, the Defense Department invested in technology that was going to be a definitive winner on the battlefield. We're still locked in that system, but now it's the private sector where there's far more dynamic and innovative developments. But this revolution that's taking place in digital technology is in the private sector. And we don't know how to bring that into the government because we want them to slow down and fit our model. Well, they're not going to do that. Defense acquisition runs at X and the private sector is moving at 5X. I mean, their development cycles are measured in months. Our development cycles are measured in years, almost decades.
Part of the answer to encouraging faster innovation may lie in adding more companies to the mix. Since 1990, the number of defense prime contractors has plummeted, going from 13 in some weapons categories to no more than 3, and in some categories to only 1 or 2.
If we were talking in the 1990s, we would have had dozens of big defense companies. That helps competition, it helps innovation. Now there are 5 defense primes. We've had massive consolidation of the defense industry, and that means prices are likely to go up and knowledge gets lost and innovation is slower than it otherwise would be. Do we need more companies in defense? And the answer is a resounding yes, we do.
One reason there's less competition today than in the 1990s is the U.S. budget process itself, which makes it difficult to invest in new systems and discourages smaller companies from sticking around to find out whether the political winds in Washington will blow their way.
So the first thing, if I were queen of the world for a day, that Congress could do would be to pass an annual budget. So most Americans, I think, hear that there's a continuing resolution in Congress and the government's averted a shutdown, and isn't that good news? From an innovation perspective, it's terrible news. So whenever Congress can't reach a budget and we're operating on a continuing resolution, it means the Pentagon can spend no new money. That means no new weapons, no new research and development. And so if you're a small company, like a startup here in Silicon Valley, the Pentagon is a terrible customer because Congress doesn't pass a budget. Thousands of very small companies that are key suppliers in the defense industry have left the defense business in the past decade because of this cockamamie budget process that Congress cannot pass an annual budget and can't fund new innovation in the interim.
Perhaps the most important force driving the inertia at the Defense Department today is the premium it puts on avoiding risk at all costs.
The question becomes, is it all necessary? Or are we over-flexing on how much risk we're willing to accept. We're like willing to accept no risk. And when I was a chief engineer of a series of space programs back at Raytheon, it was really bad. They wanted not a single shred of risk on the space program. And I would say, I would actually contend that that's what really crippled our space program until SpaceX came around, is that the zero risk appetite, not control risk, not manage risk, eliminate all risk. That's one of the biggest factors that's slowing down the DoD on these large programs.
But now we live in this world where it's got to be perfect every step of the way. And that means we have excessive costs and very slow acquisition.
Rapidly changing technologies could run up against a military-industrial complex largely focused on what is instead of what will be. And if that weren't enough, we're on the verge of an even more fundamental shift in the dynamics of warfare, the shift to artificial intelligence. The Pentagon's AI-related spending tripled from 2022 to 2023.
I think generative AI, like all technologies, has upside and downside risk. One of the benefits of Gen AI is that it can come up with things that humans would never have imagined. From a tactical perspective in battle, that's a good thing. From a strategic perspective, how are we managing conflict between two countries? It can be very dangerous. I worry a lot that we haven't fully thought through the crisis escalation risks when other countries are adopting generative AI and not thinking through how it could lead us into situations neither side would want.
Whether it's artificial intelligence or swarming drones or any of the many other changes the Pentagon faces, it's more important than ever that we get what we pay for. And looking to the private sector may help show the way.